Welcome to the Alex Salmond Show and to a very special edition. The show is celebrating our first anniversary, and today we'll look back at what some of our guests have had to say over the last year. Now, we filmed in Brussels, Geneva, Beirut, Dublin, New York, Washington, Gibraltar, Barcelona, Brittany, Strasbourg, and of course, Scotland. But first, to what has become a fixture of our show, your tweets, your messages, and your emails. And over to Alex.
Yes, Taz, and a big selection this week, thanks largely to our Facebook premiere, which had a record audience. And first up is Louise Hogg, who says, "It was interesting to hear folk from the House of Lords." I love that phrase, folk from the Lords. Still not sure if enough MPs are willing to block and reverse Brexit, though. And Maureen Hollinsworth on the same issue says, "Very informative show once again, Alec and Tasmina. As usual, I was up with a lark this morning to watch. It's always the highlight of my week." Thank you, Maureen. But John Connolly warns, given the UK is due to leave the EU on March the 29th, 2019, then any constitutional wrangling before the judges would have to occur quickly in the new year. Well, John, I think the Luxembourg court hearing on Article 50 is going to be at the end of this month, so there might well be time enough. And now a couple of messages from the pro-Brexit point of view. Paul Freeman says, "I want Brexit and Scottish independence." Awkward. What is the point in leaving the UK to then make the EU our new ruler? And in the same vein, Murray Goodfellow says, "At what point will you address the 38% of us who voted to leave? In a group of 5 people, that's 3 who voted Remain, 2 for Brexit. It's not the landslide you keep talking about." And what Murray's saying there is about the vote in Scotland, which was overwhelmingly for Remain, but wasn't a landslide, as Murray points out. And finally, Ian Leckenby says, "Would be cracking if Mr. Salmond was here on the Facebook live chat to engage with his audience directly." That's a great suggestion, Ian. We'll certainly take you up on that. And now, as Tasmina said, this is our first anniversary. So let's take a look at what we promised you last year when we launched the show. Join me every Thursday on the Alex Salmond Show, when I'll be speaking to guests on the world of politics, sport, business and show business. I'll see you then.
Welcome to another part of our set here at the Alex Salmond Show. Now, last year, Alex went to Beirut to interview one of the world's most experienced leaders, President Michel Aoun of Lebanon. Someone who remembers as a boy General de Gaulle seizing Lebanon from Vichy control and declaring independence in 1941. And I can see, Alex, you're wearing the same suit.
Yeah, I bought it in Beirut, but I've changed my shirt. So General Aoun, a very cool customer. As you say, he's seen it all in his many, many years in power and politics. But the day I interviewed him, he just extracted his prime minister from the tender mercies of Saudi Arabia and was reassembling his cabinet. He speaks great English. He conducted the interview in Arabic, but his English is excellent. And I had an audience with him before the interview proper. And he said to me, he said, "First Minister, can you explain to me the differences and the similarities between Scotland and Lebanon?" I said, "Well, differences, climate. You know, Scotland can be a bit parky. You know, it can be a bit cold. Lebanon's got a wonderful climate, sir." And he said, "And the similarities?" So I said, "Well, we're both small countries with large expatriate populations." He goes, "Yes, yes." He says, "But no, I was thinking more, we both have problems with our neighbours." So let's see what he had to say. And what would your message be as President of Lebanon to the major regional powers, firstly to Saudi Arabia and then to Iran?
بعتقد إنه السلام هو بجيب الازدهار وبجيب الأمان.
I think that peace provides prosperity and security for all, and war is a loss for everyone because all the resources of any country are wasted during any war. And instead, these resources could be used to contribute to the country's prosperity and development.
بازدهار البلد واستقراره.
Of course, Tasmina herself was involved in a bit of a cloak and dagger operation, not in Beirut, but in Brussels, within the circumstances where we were trying to get an interview with Carles Puigdemont, the leader of Catalonia. What happened?
Well, it was a bit Bond-esque, wasn't it? We were told that we had to get to Brussels with a camera crew and we'd receive a call at 1 o'clock Brussels time. So there we were in the middle of Brussels, not quite knowing what was going to happen next. But at 1 o'clock, the call came. I was then told to download an app that would give me further instructions. So I downloaded the app to my telephone.
An encrypted app?
Well, I've no idea. It possibly was, of course, because his security was of paramount importance to everybody involved. Then I was to download a further app, which would give me instructions, and eventually that came through with an address as to where we were to travel, and we had to hire a minibus because it was outside of Brussels to get there as soon as we possibly can. And we turned up at this large sort of polo club type venue. Which
I remember this. The place was full of delegates, business delegates at a conference, and many of them were Spanish.
They were indeed, and I was a bit worried because we knew, of course, the President in exile was about to turn up, and there was lots of Spanish delegates there, and I felt I needed to speak to them and give them some instructions.
Oh, I remember that bit as well. You give them firm instructions that if they put any pictures on the internet, the social media, they'd be sued by a Scottish lawyer jointly and severally.
They certainly have a fear of Scots law because they did exactly what they were told. And of course, it was a terrific interview.
And it was his first major interview in English.
It was a tragic day because I see directly the violence in my face. The school in my hometown, there are a lot of injuries.
Of course, Catalonia has featured highly on the show's agenda throughout the year, and recently you were in Barcelona to interview the new president, Quim Torra.
Now, you're the new president, but there is also a new prime minister in Spain, Senor Sanchez. Mm-hmm. Does that open up the possibility of dialogue, which clearly hasn't been there over the past few years?
Yeah, exactly. I had a meeting with Mr. Sanchez. So for the first time in many years, we had the opportunity to sit together around the same table and to talk about everything. This is a good starting point. We agreed that this is a political issue that should be solved politically. Now they're starting this dialogue between Catalonia and Spain. But now we should see facts from the Spanish government, and we will be there. We will be there to talk about everything.
Yes, the fascinating politics of Catalonia has been a strong theme in the show. And one of our other features has been Ireland. Important in itself, of course, but also because Irish politicians realised much earlier than British ones of the central position that Ireland would play in Britain's Brexit drama. Back in the spring in Dublin, they were laying out the issues in no uncertain terms.
My worry is, of course, that some of the paramilitaries, the smaller operations, have not gone away. They do not enjoy public support, but give them a cause. And that cause could be a camera on a border. It could be a mobile patrol on a border. Because here's the thing: we now enjoy a completely open and free border. After Brexit, whatever we get will be less than that.
You were the Taoiseach who negotiated from the Irish side the Good Friday Agreement. How much of a risk is the Brexit process to that crucial agreement that brought peace to Ireland?
The whole idea was to try and make the island of Ireland one economic unit so that we could move freely without any restrictions, without any regulations whatever. The trade was through a frictionless border, which meant, because now there's so many arguments, but at the time it was a border that was free of any security, free of any checks, free of any passport or regulatory controls of any kind. Then we've had 15 years plus of an island that was developing and an island that had economic links and was working perfectly. And unfortunately, Brexit in so many ways undermines that.
I think the Tories have played a very dangerous game. No way can Ireland, or should Ireland, or will Ireland be the collateral damage in the midst of all of that.
Now, Brexit has, of course, dominated all of the headlines over the past year, and politicians have had plenty to say about it on this show. It is an issue which splits politics and political parties right down the middle.
Yeah, these two clips, the first two clips, illustrate this. I mean, Alistair Campbell, the Campbell, somebody I've disagreed with on just about everything, but not necessarily on Brexit. And then Kate Hoey, a woman politician I've admired for many years, I've agreed with on just about everything except on Brexit.
How I long for Mrs May to stand up and make a speech like this. I voted Remain, but on becoming Prime Minister, I felt duty-bound to deliver the result, to leave. I have tried. But having looked at it every which way, I've concluded it cannot be done without massive damage to our economy, our public services and our standing in the world.
Parliament voted overwhelmingly before the referendum to accept its result. And the government repeated that promise in an expensive pamphlet delivered to every home. It must go ahead to show the British people that politicians can keep their promises.
90% of UK scientists were for Remain, and the reason is very clear. We're internationalists, and the EU has been our team.
The government has moved its negotiating position to accommodate the demands of Europe. And it's impossible then to do a deal with someone when you show such weakness. And I mean, I think that the Prime Minister has at this stage now got to consider, does she dig her heels in? Does she even take back some of the compromises she's already offered to the EU and say, I'll tell you what, we're going to have a fight about this now?
Now, trade talks are usually about lowering barriers, country on country or whatever. Certainly not raising barriers with 94, which is about more than half the number of countries in the WTO. So it's quite a staggering undertaking the UK is endeavouring at the moment.
I can't wait for it to happen, and I really do believe that the United Kingdom is going to do incredibly well. On these trade talks that we're talking about, when we leave in 2019, then Liam Fox will be able to start those negotiations in earnest.
And of course the European debate, the Brexit debate, which is very lively, is also now central to the Scottish constitutional debate, which is also lively.
I believe passionately that Britain should remain in the European Union. It's a great edifice, a great historical purpose to the whole operation. We should be celebrating that. But instead the party has decided to look at the Brexit vote, be concerned about upsetting people when the nation's crying out for leadership.
But the important point is that once we know the deal between the UK and the EU, then I think we then need to map out very clearly a way forward as quickly as possible towards achieving independence. We need independence as urgently as possible so that we can get Scotland back up to the top echelons of economic performance and realise the benefits of our own resources for our own people.
In plain person's language, it means the MPs could strike it out if the court finds in their favour. What would be the political implications if such a judgment was handed down?
Well, they're huge, because at the present moment we've got Theresa May and indeed her colleagues that are left supporting her saying it's her way checkers or the highway and no-deal Brexit. This would show that there's an alternative, which is that you could strike both of them down and you could seek to withdraw Article 50 if the court agree with that.
It's been both a privilege and a pleasure to have interviewed some of the strongest women in politics, present and past. Starting first with the inimitable Baroness Helena Kennedy and, of course, the former presiding officer of the Scottish Parliament, the wonderful Tricia Marwick.
Half of the population in this country is female, and so we should be proactively pursuing changes in the institutions which govern this country. That means we have to change Parliament, and we have to have equal numbers of men and women in there. All parties should be required to have all women shortlists as seats become available, and we should start this between now and the next election.
People say to me, it must have been a huge thrill for you to be the first woman presiding over the Scottish Parliament, and of course it was. But I used to say in response to that, yes, but I was also the first presiding officer who did not go to a private school.
And of course, who could forget your fascinating interview with Edwina Currie?
Yeah, she's some lady, and that was some set I was interviewing her on.
In fact, one of our viewers tweeted about the set, and Edwina responded back, asking where it come from, all of these creatures, animals, all this wallpaper. But she said it was a special room that she paid for money she'd received from doing either I'm a Celebrity or Big Brother, but it is quite something else.
I've got a giraffe behind me.
Ah, yes, well, perhaps I should tell you that myself and Louisa, our series director, decided that there was a gorilla behind you in the first place, and we thought we'd move that to behind Edwina and substitute it for the giraffe. I've not told Edwina that yet either.
What would I do without Louisa? even when you speak to people now, if you say the name Edwina Currie, they say curried eggs or make some reference to it. Very few political controversies have lasted that length of time.
Well, could I say first of all that being a health minister under Margaret was a wonderful experience because she was actually a radical prime minister. If you could convince her of something, she would say, go for it. And she'd give the opportunities and the finances and the wherewithal to get things happening. She would fire questions at you. And you had to have the figures. You had to have everything written on the inside of your forehead. She didn't like it if you were shuffling up papers. She would fire a question, you had to have an answer, even if it was wrong. Alex, you could write her afterwards and say, well, I said 55 million, but it's actually 56 million. She'd be fine with that. But you couldn't say, I don't know.
Coming up after the break, we turn to showbiz, sport, and some of the human interest stories we've covered here on the Alex Salmond Show.
Welcome back to our review of the first year of the Alex Salmond Show. Now, when I started this programme, I had no idea I'd get the opportunity to interview Winston Churchill, aka the actor Brian Cox, or for that matter, to play Carnegie Hall.
So welcome to Carnegie Hall, Alex.
Thank you so much, Gina.
You know the joke, how do you get to Carnegie Hall?
Which is?
Some buy a ticket, but some have to have their own show.
Now, listen, you started as an usher here.
I did.
Where were you?
All the way up there to that back light. I was in the balcony, October 1, 1974. I remember calling my father saying, I heard Ella Fitzgerald and they were paying me $6 a night.
Of the politicians you've played, I mean, have you, because you played a range of politics, I mean, most recently Churchill, an extraordinary performance in the film last year, the Churchill film. But you played a range, you played Michael Martin, the Speaker of the House of Commons.
Yes,
so have you got a favourite?
My favourite character I played was Nye Bevan.
All right.
I did a film about Nye Bevan, which was written by a wonderful writer called Trevor Griffiths, and this was in the 90s, and it was about his last days, and it was a fantastic film, and he was an extraordinary character because he was the guy who created the National Health Service.
Of course, whilst in New York City, Alex also had the chance to catch up with the Tartan Day Parade.
However, New York still commands the most colourful displays. Here they place a premium on big and brash. Most of the tartans on display at the parade are of a traditional variety, but there are modern Scottish designers who see kilts as a cool choice of wear, not just for a Sunday best.
Over the past few months, we've had the opportunity to cover a number of human interest subjects, including Islamophobia. I spoke to Baroness Uden. There is this feeling, this almost incumbent upon Muslim women just to keep going.
Yes.
But it doesn't mean to say it's difficult. Don't you have moments when you wonder why you're doing all of this, why you feel like you're fighting the world, sometimes to no avail?
I can't wait for my granddaughter, who's 2, her generations to be frustrated as I am today with a country, essentially as a Muslim woman. I think Britain, you will know this, you've traveled like I have to so many parts of the world. It's one of the best places to be a Muslim woman, but not in the political platform, not in a political arena.
During the month of April and May, 19 members of the Conservative Party were either expelled or suspended because of the unsavory remarks they made regarding the Muslims.
We also covered the disturbing rise in anti-Semitism.
Yeah, I had the privilege of speaking to Freddie Noller, Holocaust survivor, living quietly in London for many years. What a joy it was to speak to him. And then I spoke to the chief rabbi, who had some really strong views on the importance of commemorating the Holocaust.
Naturally, I had false papers. For 100 francs, I bought myself some false papers, and I changed my name to Robert Metzner, born in Alsace-Lorraine.
So that worked for a while. They didn't identify who you really were.
That's right.
But then you were discovered.
I met a girl, I fell in love with her. Jacqueline was her name. And I told her that I was in the resistance. But one day when we had fight between each other, she went to the Germans and told them that Freddie Noller, that Robert Metzner is not from Alsace-Lorraine, but he's working for the resistance.
Anti-Semitism is a threat to our entire society. So the fact that the British nation are investing in this initiative is of enormous significance, and most of all to our Holocaust survivors,
because they are really deeply worried. What's going to happen beyond their own lifetime? We need to let them know that we're going to carry their torch for them. We will guarantee that we will remember the Holocaust, and more importantly, we'll remember the lessons of the Holocaust.
Of course, sometimes showbiz and human interests come together. Let's hear from Debbie Arnold in the moving story of her mother.
With me is Debbie Arnold, whose mother Mary came to London on the very last train as part of the Kinder Transport programme. Welcome to the Alex Salmond Show, Debbie.
Hi, Alex. Thank you for having me.
Now, your mother told you a great deal about what she remembers, so tell me exactly, how old was she? What did she remember about getting on the train? What was the last time she saw your grandparents?
Well, she remembers sitting on her papa's knee and him saying to her, if you hear yes and no, you're in England. So she knew those words in English. Then she said that she remembered going to the station and she was really excited to go and see a train in a station. And she was with Mama and Papa.
And this was from Vienna?
This was from Vienna. She was holding her mother and father's hand, and her auntie was there as well, and she was skipping towards the train. Loads of people at the station. Then she turned around and her mother had gone, her father had gone, and she was holding hands with her auntie. And she was looking around for Mama and Papa, bearing in mind she was this high. And then the next thing she knew, she was pushed on the train and turned around and her auntie was gone.
One of the great aspects of featuring popular campaigns is that you meet people at the sharp end of great projects, insights which can change your mind, certainly changed my mind a bit about HS2. This is what people near Euston Station think of HS2.
I don't quite understand why it's such a wonderful thing, given that it doesn't seem to reduce journey times that much or dramatically, and it will be, I mean, it will certainly price ordinary travellers off its trains.
Well, it's not coming to Liverpool, which is very nice, I suppose, really. Can't go everywhere, but I think Liverpool's quite an important network around the northwest.
And where we live is about to become the biggest construction site in Europe. So to give you an idea of what we face, we've been told by HS2 that in order to develop the line, they're going to have to remove 3.5 million tonnes of spoil, and that will mean hundreds of thousands of HGVs, heavy goods vehicles, coming in to and out of Camden.
Some of our most favourite moments, of course, have been with sports personalities and legends such as Doddy Weir.
Well, Doddy Weir, I got an opportunity to interview him at Murrayfield Stadium, and he's an absolute delight because battling a crippling illness. And this weekend, that'll be acknowledged in front of tens of thousands of people when Wales play Scotland in Cardiff. I think Scotland will win that one.
But I've always taken the bad or the negative side of things. So when the rugby, I always thought when the team got announced I was going to get dropped. So if I was dropped, I was expecting it, so it wouldn't be a shock. If I was in the team, I was quite delighted. I'm back in, I'm still
You didn't
there.
get dropped too often, don't you?
Well,
61 caps.
Well, now and again I did, and the reason behind that, and the same was the attitude for MND. I had an idea that this is what it was, and everything propelled to that, what it was. So when I got told it, it was, okay, right, what do we do now? It was a ticket that someone has given me. So let's get on and just try and see if we can try and get something sorted.
Because Doddy Weir's a rugby legend, and a motor racing legend is Sir Jackie Stewart. I interviewed Jackie in Switzerland, and the thing that Doddy and Jackie have in common is that they're both engaged in huge campaigns. In the case of Sir Jackie Stewart, it's the race against dementia, which has afflicted his wife, Helen. You've had some success in awareness of dyslexia, much more still to be done, but some success. Now you've taken on perhaps the biggest battle of all, the race against dementia. Tell me why that's become one of your personal priorities.
About 4 years ago, Helen went to the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, in the United States, and got identified as having dementia. Dementia has no cure currently and has no preventive medicine to stop people from having dementia. Helen's short-term memory now is very weak. Sometimes she doesn't know whether she's in Switzerland or England. It's a terrible disease for many people. What a terrible cost it is to a family.
And speaking of legends, here's the wonderful Judy Murray at our Christmas show in Edinburgh.
It's the woman wholly responsible for 2 Wimbledon champions.
I mean, I would never have imagined when I started out as a volunteer coach at Dunblane Tennis Club when my kids were in nappies, and I did it to get out the house. and I traded tennis sessions for childcare because we had no money. Don't judge me. So, you know, the parents of the kids that I worked with, they had to look after the boys in the clubhouse while I did the coaching. And it just kind of snowballed from there slowly. But I never would have imagined we'd all end up doing what we're currently doing, not in a month of Sundays.
And of course, our Christmas show allowed us to have some seasonal fun with the very Reverend I Am Jolly.
I did win the Life and Work competition to the World Cup in Russia next year. A weekend in Vladivostok and £200 spending money, or 6 rubles. 6 rubles to the pound, I inquired. No, after Brexit, 6 is your lot. The very Reverend Putin has signed me up for his new television show. Songs of praise, I inquired. No, just the praise, came the reply. Well, that's a pretty lively first year. Now, tell me, Tasmina, what you got planned for the coming year?
Well, certainly the next couple of episodes, a bit of a change in tone to commemorate Remembrance Sunday. And that's starting, of course, with an episode. We've got a couple of episodes, actually, in fact, on the Lancastria. Here's a taster.
One of the most remarkable aspects of the Lancastria disaster is that in many ways it's better remembered in France than it is in Britain. And so, Tasmina, of all the clips we've seen, of all the interviews we've conducted, what's your favourite? Is it one of my eloquent outros, perhaps?
I think even more exciting than one of your famous summing ups for me has been Ryan Joseph Burns, who on our Burns special gave us a wonderful rendition of A Fond Kiss, and I think it's apt that he plays us out of the show today. So thank you all for joining us on this special anniversary edition. We hope to see you all next week. And from all of us here at the studio and all of the wonderful team at the Alex Salmond Show, it's goodbye.
For now.
A fond kiss and then we sever. A farewell lost forever. Deep in heart-wrung tears I'll pledge thee. War and sighs and groans I'll wage thee. And who shall say that fortune grieves him while the star of hope she leaves him? Meany cheerful twinkle awaits me, dark despair around.